Hello, my name's Tom Carhill. It's Monday. It's the 12th of May, 2014. This isn't going to be like a major in-depth video about all the subjects raised, but I'm going to have to skim over some things because they've all been dealt with in great detail elsewhere, and the purpose of it is just to flag up some questions, and then you decide for yourself. The subject matter is a guy called Bill Maloney. Right now, this guy, I first probably came across him about 4 years ago, something like that. And he sets himself out to be an anti-child abuse campaigner. He claims that he was in institutional care, and so was some of his family. And he also claims that one of his sisters was basically murdered, he reckons, as a result of him making these films. These films are more like documentaries, the ones that I've seen. Apparently, no, they're not all like that, but all the ones I've seen are just like sort of amateur documentaries. They're quite good. And they're doing a good job. They are doing a good job, or they were doing a good job of showing how distraught people get when they've been abused in care, sexually and physically. But he reckons he doesn't remember being sexually abused, but of course he reckons they also drug a lot of the kids. And see, this is the thing. I'm not wanting to tar him with the same brush in this particular instance, but it's a bit like Brian Gerrish. First of all, he starts in a kind of sort of like fury of sort of telling you lots of stuff, and you start realising a lot of it gels, and you realise it's true, and it requires a lot of further research, and you pay attention to him for about a year. I didn't with Bill Maloney because he's pretty much a one-trick pony kind of thing. I'm not knocking him for that, but he's only got one subject area, and once you already know that they're institutional abuse and stuff, you don't really need to hear about it every single day. But the point is, he obviously set his stall out well by doing these good films, or quite informative documentaries, and he seemed like he really cared, and he obviously had the trust of the people who who were like, the sort of subjects of these films. Now, the thing with this is, then he's moved on to do other things, but not really anything of any substance. He's done a few protests and stuff, I believe. The thing with him is, right, this is where I'd start having the problem. Like with Brian Gerrish, it's almost like he's just sort of done nothing since then. So if you were like hunting down the internet for material on the guy, he sort of turned up and he had a load of information, and you could look at his films for free and stuff like that. Then all of a sudden, it's like a dead end. If you were checking every day for, updates, you'd be checking. You'd only get about 2 updates a year. So I mean, I'm not saying he's if he's just doing it off his own back and he's not getting paid, I can understand how that can happen. But at the same time, though, it's like, if you've got a bit of momentum going, why would you drop it? Do you see what I mean? It's because with these things, if you think your sister's been murdered as a result of your work, and also, and you've continued to work since then, so it's not like that scared you and you stopped, you continued. You've gone to Jersey to that Hort de la Gran orphanage, and another orphanage which had been abandoned, I think, and you've done all this stuff. It's all really quite interesting. And now what he does is he just says things like, "Yeah, I've heard the Royals, yeah, they're involved with it," and you're just like, "Well, yeah, right, okay then, Bill. So, what about like hitting targets you can actually see, or actually hitting a couple of targets?" Because there was this one called Mentally Heroes, and he was going on about this guy called, I think, let's say he was called Derek Bird. He wasn't called Derek Bird. It was something like that. And he goes, "Oh yeah, he was a prolific abuser of children." This guy was an old guy. I think he's dead now. Anyway, basically, it was sort of proven either just after he died or just before he died, or maybe he's not dead yet. But he's sort of like a has-been old prison guard and a sort of borstal that he was like raping the young men. But the point was, this is where I had my first, not doubt, but it's a grey mark, definitely not a black mark, because some people are just too up themselves, or too stupid, or whatever, to know when to get back to people. We could have just been having a bad day, so we couldn't be bothered. But basically, I got in touch with him and I said, "Look, Bill, done a lot of good work. I've watched it all. I think thanks very much, and I think you've done it. You've probably caused a lot of consolation for a lot of distraught people. It's probably helped them a lot. But stop calling somebody who has sex with a sort of 18 or a 19-year-old in a prison allegedly raping them, stop calling them paedophiles, because they're not paedophiles. It's a total distraction. So then when someone's thinking about you and you're going, oh, it's institutional paedophilia, and it's like a prison, well, they're not paedophiles then, are they? Because they're not there. I just thought the whole thing is stupid. And, you know, like, if you're going to get into an area like that, I think, you know, the fact that the numpty-head British public don't know the difference between ice cream and dog poo, unless you like, you know, if you dyed the ice cream brown, you know, that they do need, for the more intelligent ones, you do need to, like, explain to them that you're talking about someone who has a sexual preference for, like, people who come up to your sort of waist, as opposed to people who can come up to you, you know, the same height as you. The difference between a grown-up and someone who's just someone who's young and vulnerable, and you've tricked them and they're overage, and then there's people who are just like skirting around the edges of that. You know, like, it's very, very important to remember. And also, you've got to remember, if you're talking about male on male sort of sexual assaults, it's not, well, you know, like in America you've got statutory rape. I suppose you've still got the same here, really. It's not, if you're sort of saying he sexually abused somebody, if I'm 15 and somebody had sex with me, then technically that would be sexual assault, wouldn't it? Or, yeah, it would be rape, wouldn't it? But the point is, if I was 16 and they actually raped me, as opposed to me going along with it, what's worse? You see, it just causes a lot of confusion. And when you're trying to be exact, you've got to be exact, and you don't want people to be able to shoot you down. So I just pointed that out. And anyway, he didn't get back to me. So I thought, okay, and I think I must have mentioned this a few times. Every time I'd see him speak, and I mean like YouTube videos, I never actually met the guy or seen him, I'd mention this to him. And I think I also mentioned to him things about Roger Hayes and Brian Gerrish being bad news. But the point is, he must know they're bad news, yet he's still endorsing them. The last time I seen a little video of his, or it wasn't really a proper video, it was just 2 or 3 minutes of him just being a big mouth, there's this woman who sort of attached herself to the UK column just about the time it was completely sinking. And the UK column's the organisation set up by COINTELPRO agent, communist subversive, Brian Gerrish. And there's this numpty head attached to it called Roger Hayes, who's just an idiot. He's a lowlife, he's very dishonest, deceitful, he's greedy, he cheats people, but he isn't like a brains, do you know what I mean? He's not a communist agent. They wouldn't have him, there's no way. You know, I mean, he might possibly be allowed in the Freemasons. Yeah, he'd be allowed in the Freemasons, but he wouldn't be allowed very high up in the Freemasons. He's just a complete pathetic, dishonest. He's got a Freemason haircut, by the way. Yeah, so he could maybe yeah, I mean, I don't really understand what his game is, but he's just basically being used as a kind of distraction. But the point is, this is where it's very important. So you might say these are pathetic nobodies, and that Brian Gerrish is an evil genius, but really, you know, does he want to take him on because he's because he's very malicious and he could cause him maybe some problems? The point is, I've exposed Brian Gerrish to be a complete liar and a cheat and a fraud, and he didn't do anything to me. Now, I know if you've got actual children and they're potentially going into care, he tries to sabotage the court cases, and these people are a much more vulnerable situation to me. So he can cause problems for them, potentially, just because they're in a psychologically massively weakened state. But you see, the thing is, there's nothing he can actually do to this Bill Maloney character. And again, so you say, well, why wouldn't he renounce him? And then you might say, well, why would you renounce him? Now, the reason you'd renounce him is because Brian Gerrish has been going around telling people that if they put a commercial lien on somebody, they can get their children back, or, you know, they can fight the courts and all this rubbish. And so is Roger Hayes. So the point is, Roger Hayes went on I think it's called Edge Media. I think it was 2010 or 2011. He went on their Christmas special, and he said, if you're having problems with the state trying to take your children, put a commercial lien on them, phone us if you need any help, and we'll give you some help. We've been having great success with it. When he knew full well at the time it would do absolutely nothing apart from aggravate the situation, and you're almost certainly going to lose the children anyway. But you see, these people just take the children out of the context a minute. These people are absolutely at their wits' end. Normally they've had the children taken off them anyway, and from what I hear, they're basically the state's never going to give them back anyway, because this is the agenda, to steal the children. It's a communist agenda. So to give them extra hope, it's not just about giving them less hope, it's about giving them this extra work. I don't know if you know, I'm going to digress very quickly here. Apparently, what really stresses people out is if they've got lots of different things causing them problems. If you've got one big problem, such as if you're a prisoner on death row, you rarely exhibit the same signs of stress as somebody who's got lots of different little stresses, because you get your head around it, you just accept it, or you don't accept it. But you've only got one thing to deal with. People generally, it's not that bad for them, right, in terms of their everyday psychological problems. If you've got somebody who's at their wit's end, or a whole family at their wit's end, if you start giving them false hope, getting them to waste all their time on this stuff, and then you start losing their court documents and files and all that stuff, he's an absolute scumbag, telling them he's going to help them out of the court case, not to get a lawyer, then he doesn't turn up for the court case. I've covered this in other videos, but the point is, this Bill Maloney must know about this, right? Now, if he's so concerned about these families and these children, and these young men and women who he calls children but aren't, because they're like in their early 20s or whatever, these victims of paedophiles in their 20s, right? Surely he should flag Brian Gerrish up and just say, bad news, bad news. And also, same token, even worse, would be Roger Hayes, because he actually went on the Christmas special and he said all those vicious lies that were going to, designed to completely wreck people's lives. So why didn't he do it? So you've got constant use of the word paedophile in a completely inappropriate context. Backing of Brian Gerrish. Now, we've got an even more disgusting subversive operating out of England, and I'll tell you why she's more disgusting. Because she is actually, well, she's got other focuses, but her main focus, she's actually set up a website called Options Not Adoptions. I believe it's optionsnotadoptions.com, but I haven't got the internet on at the minute, so I can't check. Now, her name is Belinda Mackenzie. Right now, Mackenzie's a name, and Mackenzie was a previous game. I don't know if this one's still going. She set up something called the Mackenzie's Friend something or another, and it was basically for people who had to represent themselves in court. And what she does is she basically sets apparent interest groups up, or she gets involved with other ones, and she kicks the leaders out through subversion, because she's a Marxist agitator. And she just basically wrecks them, drives them into the ground. She's highly trained here, she's getting on a bit, she's very good at it, and I think she also uses brainwashing techniques on people, or so I've heard, and I've got no reason to disbelieve these people, because a lot of people will be hanging around with her, they've got lots of brains, she'll do loads of cuntish stuff, and they'll come back with the conclusion she's really great, and you can prove that she's not, and they'll still go along with it. Now, the thing with her is, we don't really need to speculate about whether she's a criminal, or she works for the government, or she's a total cunt, right? The reason we don't need to do that is because she was working for a company, so she basically set up a charity called Iran Aid about 15 years ago. It was basically to give money to homeless, or was it orphan children in Iran. That's what it was for. Yet there was no evidence she'd ever given any of this money to these children. There was evidence, however, of her transferring all the money that had been given to the charity into her own personal bank account. And when the company was ordered to be kind of frozen, and all the records were meant to be sealed and not be allowed to look at, which is what the Charities Commission sort of ordered, she just went in and just destroyed them all, and nothing ever happened to her. Now it's a criminal offence, and then the police, despite the fact that the Charities Commission said it's fraud, and they very rarely say things are fraud, they said, we're not dealing with this is for the police, because we're a regulator, we don't deal with outright criminality. Police never did anything. Now, she stole millions and millions of pounds there. That's, I think, something like £3 or £5 million. It's not just like 1.2 million or something. It's quite a few million. So she steals money under the auspices of it being for children. She's an absolute lowlife. Now, so she set up this thing called Options Not Adoptions, and the idea is she's sucking in anybody who's in problems, like in the same kind of problem that Brian was picking up, and she just basically messes them around, probably extracts money off them, and then just drops them. And in the midst of this, also, she'll be obviously agitating, won't she? Because this agitates absolute chaos. It creates turmoil. It completely wrecks people's lives. Not as I said, take the children out of the equation here. Once the children are gone, the children are gone. You're not going to get them back. So don't think, oh, maybe you will, you're not going to get them back, because they've been adopted. They've gone, right? They won't even be in the country a lot of the time. So you've got to remember that this woman is parasiting off someone who's had probably the worst. I mean, a lot of people would rather die than have the children taken off them. There's lots of people who be like that. So she's doing one of the most lowest things. It's so low most people couldn't even comprehend. And along with what she's doing there, she's also got like a little sidekick. And this is this guy called Tony Farrell. Right now, Tony Farrell, if you ever meet him, he always sort of says everything, and then afterwards goes, "'Cause I'm a Christian." And the thing is, he's got this big. I never noticed the first time I seen him, but with lots of things, like you get all the evidence the first time you see them, but it only starts clicking together, maybe even years later. You think, why did he say that? That's weird. So you remember it, but you don't even remember remembering it, and then he keeps going on about how he's a Christian, and he'll say that numerous times when he's talking about something that's got nothing to do with Christianity or religion or faith or anything along those lines. And then you look at him in profile and you think, no, you're not. You're a Jewish subversive, aren't you, Tony? But anyway, the first time I ever seen him, he basically claimed that he was a ex-South Yorkshire intelligence analyst for the police. Nobody thought to check this, but when they did, turns out no one even knew him in South Yorkshire. So you've got all these people who are apparently really good investigators, and they hadn't even checked this stuff. It's hilarious. You find it very, very difficult to make it up. But anyway, he's also involved with this, not a charity, but they call him like making out it's a charity. And I don't know. It's just that surely again, going back to Bill Maloney, why haven't you said there's a lot of people pretending to be charities and name them? I mean, what are these people going to do? They're not. There's nothing they can do about it. He should be naming them, but he's not naming them. Right. So basically, what I think with Bill Maloney is, I think he does things to make himself incredible, and then he doesn't expose extremely horrible, disgusting, subversive elements who are a danger to children and are using the suffering of children and also their entire families and extended families to rip them off, make them extremely depressed, make them extremely agitated. And for those of you who are watching and thinking, well, I'm glad that hasn't happened to me, think you're also a victim, because this is to destroy society. This type of stuff absolutely depresses people beyond belief. They're undermining the court system, despite the fact it's very corrupt. But the fact is, they're making it seem more corrupt by bolting onto a case that's already happened and then going, oh, we'll sort it out, and they're not going to be able to sort it out. So they're giving people a lot of false hope. They're whipping up. It's a bit like chopping someone's head off and then chopping the body apart in front of the family. Like, the head's off now, it's gone. You're not, well, it's children, they're not dead, are they, yet? But they possibly might find them in the future. But the point is, you see what I mean? It's aggravated. It's a method of agitating and aggravating people who've already suffered a lot. And only very evil people will do this, but it's an absolute fact that's what they're doing. So why isn't Bill Maloney interested in that? I don't think he should. I don't really think considering he's used so much of their cover, like, he's on the show, all this stuff, why hasn't he not slapped them down? I can understand how other people have been on Brian Gerrish's show and don't really want to expose him, because they say, well, it's got nothing to do with what I'm dealing with. I don't see there's any need. There's a lot of people like that. They won't fall out with anybody who they don't need to, or they don't realise that it is actually better to, and they just then won't fall out with them. But with this case of this character here, Bill Maloney, this is his thing. This child stealing, child abuse, institutional child abuse, there'll be people coming to him and they'll be thinking, oh yeah, Brian Gerrish referred me, or like, yeah, but like I was speaking to Brian Gerrish, and he probably won't be saying anything. He'll just be letting them go, oh yeah, Brian Gerrish is a great guy. Do you see the kind of thing? It's a complete lack of integrity, which is, in this context, when you're dealing with such serious things, when he's also putting away throwaway comments like, oh yeah, the Queen's a paedophile. I know the royal family are perverts. Anyone with any fully functioning brain, if you actually think of all the things in history in the last few years that they've been up to, and the various, all their friends are paedophiles or stuff, it's quite obvious they are. But like, I wouldn't be going around banding it around as a kind of fact, and then hanging around with complete subversive degenerates. Do you see what I mean? It just doesn't make any sense. He's either completely stupid or he's a plant. Now, one other little last thing I'll leave you with. What about this thing he keeps saying about, he's got this like affiliation with this Fighters Against Child Abuse or something. Anybody who linked boxing, and you've got somebody wants some this voice shadow boxing in the background. Anybody who links child abuse with fucking boxing and all this, yeah, fighters, blah blah blah, it just makes a wank for themselves. Anyway, I've been Tom Cahill. It's Monday, the 12th of May, 2014. I'd like to hear what you say. Obviously, I'm going to get a lot of Bill Maloneyers phoning me up and saying I'm a paedophile and stuff, but that's fine. But, try and put some evidence down. It could be good practice when you come across a real one. And obviously, lots of bad language. I'm not here to discourage bad language, but use as much bad language as you feel is necessary. I've had lots of criticism of little Brian Gerrish's little mates, but they're either trying to make profound comments which don't mean anything, and you can even read them 2 or 3 times, they don't mean anything. They'd be like one-liners. But you can't even sometimes work out if they're a compliment or a criticism. And then there'll be other ones where they'll... it's hard to describe, but if you're going to make a comment, make sure there's some substance to it. Abuse me all you like, but, some substance, please. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.